Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into a dark, dusty cave, somewhere off the beaten path in ancient Greece, where the air smells like wet stone, and you can hear the faint hiss of something slithering. You're barefoot, of course, because sandals are for heroes, and you are definitely not a hero right now. The torch in your hand flickers, casting weird shadows on the cave walls, and you catch a glimpse of something scaly coiled in the corner. Yep, you're officially in Medusa's lair. And I'll be honest, you probably won't survive this. I mean, even if you don't look directly at her, there's the small problem of her being, surrounded by snakes. And probably in a really bad mood. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to know who's drifting off where. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cave around you is silent except for the occasional drip of water and the faint shuffle of something moving in the shadows. You step gingerly, your feet crunching on small pebbles, and you can't help but notice that the walls are covered in carvings. Scratches of some kind, maybe claw marks, maybe something else. You brush your fingers over them, and they're cold, almost too smooth, as if worn down by years of being touched. It feels like a place that remembers things, a place that has stories. You keep walking, and suddenly, there she is, Medusa. And guess what? She's not quite what you pictured from those old movie posters or Halloween masks. For one, she's not just some random monster hanging out in a cave waiting to pounce on unlucky travelers. She's, well, complicated. You see, Medusa wasn't always a hideous snake-haired creature. Once upon a time, cue the gentle harp music, she was actually a beautiful maiden. People said she was stunning, the kind of beauty that could stop a room. Or apparently later, turn people into stone. But that's the thing. Beauty in ancient Greece? It was a double-edged sword. The Greeks had a very particular idea of beauty. Golden hair, pale skin, a certain curvy but not too curvy figure, and Medusa fit the bill. Well, until the whole snake situation happened, of course. And here's a little twist. Snakes were actually seen as sacred creatures back then. They weren't just creepy crawlers. Snakes symbolized wisdom, protection, and even fertility. So, having them for hair? Not exactly a horror show, more like an ancient badge of honor. Sort of like rocking a pair of designer sunglasses that also happen to hiss at you occasionally. The cave feels like it's watching you now. The air shifts, cooler against your skin, and you start to imagine what it would have been like to stand in front of Medusa in her prime. Maybe she wasn't hiding in the dark, waiting for some muscle-bound hero to show up. Maybe she was just tired. Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of the constant fear. Tired of being told her beauty was both a blessing and a curse. Historians still argue whether Medusa was a warning story like, "Hey ladies, don't get too pretty or the gods will definitely ruin your life." Or if she was a symbol of female rage and power. Either way, it's kind of a mess, and the truth probably lies somewhere in between. You shift your torch, and the light dances across the floor, revealing something that makes you pause. A small, broken mirror. It's old, maybe bronze, and it's lying half buried in the dirt. You pick it up and see your own reflection, warped and dusty. It makes you wonder, did Medusa ever get to see herself? Did she stare into a mirror and think, well, that's a lot of snakes on my head? Or did she avoid mirrors altogether, knowing what might happen if she looked too closely? Your stomach growls quietly. Apparently ancient caves don't come with snack bars, and you sigh, feeling the weight of the place settle on your shoulders. The air smells faintly of metal, like old coins or blood maybe. Not fresh though, just the lingering scent of long-forgotten stories. The snakes, you realize, aren't just hissing. They're watching you too. Little flickers of forked tongues, unblinking eyes. It's oddly hypnotic, like watching fish swim in a tank. And then, as you take a step forward, you feel a crunch beneath your foot. You look down. A stone finger, half buried in the dust. Oh, right. Those unlucky folks who didn't quite figure out the whole "don't look her in the eyes" thing. You back up slowly, heart racing a little faster. But hey, it's probably fine. Probably. So, you stand there, in the middle of this ancient, echoing cave, surrounded by snakes and whispers of a woman who once was beautiful, then cursed, then monstrous. And as your eyelids grow heavier, you wonder, what else does this cave remember that we've all forgotten? You shift your weight, careful not to step on another stone finger, or heaven forbid, a whole hand, and peer deeper into the cave's gloom. The smell of damp earth clings to your skin, mingling with the strange, almost electric scent of snake scales. The cave feels ancient, as if time itself moves slower here, where the world outside forgets you, but the whispers inside don't. The torchlight flickers, casting long, slithering shadows across the walls, and you squint at the carvings again. They're rough, like someone gouged them in a hurry. Faces, eyes, curling lines that might just be snakes. Or maybe just bad doodles from a long-forgotten age. Who knows? Historians still argue whether those marks were warnings or simply the graffiti of a bored ancient traveler waiting for his goat cheese sandwich. But let's talk about beauty, because as you stand there, you can't help but wonder how the Greeks thought about it. You've probably heard that phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But back in the day, beauty was more like a cosmic order. If you were beautiful, it meant you were good, or at least favored by the gods, until they changed their minds, of course. Medusa. She had all the hallmarks, flowing hair, before the snake situation, symmetrical features, and skin so flawless it probably made olive oil merchants weep with joy. But beauty wasn't just skin deep. It had rules. Golden hair, for example, was a big deal, like major status symbol. Greeks thought it was divine, connected to the gods themselves. So, when Medusa rocked her shiny locks, she wasn't just a pretty face. She was a walking, talking, "Look at me, I'm special" sign. And that's where things got tricky, because in a world where gods could throw thunderbolts at you for sneezing the wrong way, being too beautiful was dangerous. There's a story, probably whispered by some gossipy priestess with too much time on her hands, that Medusa served in Athena's temple as a priestess. Imagine that, a young woman devoted to a goddess known for wisdom and strategy, not for spa days or hair tutorials. And then, according to the more scandalous versions, along comes Poseidon, god of the sea, who takes a liking to Medusa. And by takes a liking, I mean, well, let's just say historians still argue whether it was love, lust, or something far darker. Either way, Athena didn't like it, whether because her temple was desecrated or because she just wasn't. A fan of messy drama, and she cursed Medusa. Her gorgeous hair, gone, replaced with a writhing nest of snakes. Her dazzling face, now a terrifying visage that could turn mortals to stone with a glance. Talk about a makeover from the underworld. But here's the weird thing. Snakes weren't always seen as bad news. In fact, in many parts of the ancient world, including Greece, snakes symbolized healing and wisdom. Ever heard of Asclepius, the god of medicine? His staff, wrapped with a snake, is still a symbol of healing today. So maybe, just maybe, Medusa's snake hair wasn't a punishment. It was a mark of power, a warning to mortals that beauty can bite. Historians still argue whether Athena cursed Medusa out of jealousy, revenge, or some twisted form of protection. Maybe it wasn't a punishment. Maybe it was armor. Your torch's glow dances across a broken amphora near your foot. You nudge it with your toe and a puff of dust rises, swirling in the still air. You can almost hear the faint laughter of the gods, distant and cold. It makes you wonder, what did Medusa think that first night, when her hair started to hiss? Did she cry, did she scream, or did she stare into the polished bronze of a shield and think, well, this is new? You shiver as a cool draft brushes past you, like a sigh from the cave itself. The snakes shift slightly, their scales rasping against the stone. One of them, a small green one with a diamond pattern, fixes you with an unblinking stare. You try not to blink back, and you realize, standing here in the cave, that Medusa's story is more than just a cautionary tale about beauty. It's about power, and who gets to define it. It's about transformation, How one moment, you're the envy of Greece, and the next, you're the monster mothers warn their kids about. It's about the slithering, sneaky ways that stories twist and change over time, until you're no longer a person. You're a myth. The torch flickers again, and you sigh. The air feels heavier now, thick with the weight of history, of stories layered on stories, until it's hard to tell what's fact and what's just a really old game of telephone. You take a step back, careful not to disturb the snakes too much, and your foot bumps a small pile of pebbles that scatter across the floor. The sound echoes, sharp and sudden, and you freeze. The snakes freeze too, their heads lifting slightly, tongues flickering. You wait. Nothing happens, except, of course, for that persistent feeling that you're being watched, not just by the snakes, but by something older, deeper. Like the cave itself is holding its breath, waiting for the next part of the story to unfold. You let out a slow breath, the sound barely a whisper in the heavy stillness of the cave. Your eyes adjust to the flickering torchlight, and you squint at a patch of rough stone etched with symbols that almost shimmer in the dim glow. Shapes, twist and coil, looping together like a tangle of vines, or, you guess, like hair. Hair that hisses and flickers in the dark. And you think about Medusa's hair, not just as a punishment, but as a statement. A bold, slithering crown that defied the gods and the neat little boxes they like to put mortals in. But why snakes? Why not, say, scorpions or spiders, or even a head full of tiny, furious lions? Well, here's the thing. Snakes had a long, weird reputation in the ancient world. They slithered between worlds, shedding their skin, symbolizing rebirth, immortality, danger, and healing all at once. Ancient Greeks often wore snake-shaped jewelry, kept snakes as temple guardians, and even used snake venom in medicines, because, of course, what's a little poison among friends? It's said that the oracle at Delphi, that famous priestess, who supposedly knew the will of the gods, once inhaled fumes from a crack in the earth where snakes were said to gather. So, in a way, Medusa's hair was a power move, whether she wanted it or not. It marked her as something other, untouchable, unpredictable, dangerous. The original "don't mess with me" vibe. And remember, in the myth, Medusa wasn't just alone. She had sisters, Stheno and Euryale, who get, frankly, a bit of a raw deal in the storytelling department. While Medusa's the one everyone remembers, her sisters were just as fearsome, immortal even. Stheno, the strong one, was said to be a brutal force of nature, and Euryale, the wide-roaming one, had a scream so loud it could shatter stone. Historians still argue whether these sisters were always part of the Medusa story, or if they were added later. Sort of like when a movie sequel suddenly adds a bunch of new characters and expects you to just roll with it. You walk deeper into the cave, your torch casting shadows that stretch and curl like the snakes themselves. The air feels thicker here, like you're moving through a story that's half forgotten, half whispered by generations of people who never quite agreed on what happened. Was Medusa a victim, a villain, or just a pawn in the games of the gods? Maybe all of the above. You can almost hear the faint hiss of debate echoing through the ages. You glance up at a high ledge, and in the dim light, you swear you see a coiled shape, scales glinting faintly. Maybe a snake. Maybe just your tired mind playing tricks on you. The cave seems to hum around you, a low vibration that's not quite sound, more like a feeling in your bones. It's as if the story itself is alive here, breathing with the slow, measured pace of a snake waiting in the dark. Your stomach gives a quiet grumble. The thought crosses your mind. What did Medusa eat? Did she hunt in the caves, using her petrifying gaze like a built-in hunting tool? Or did the snakes bring her food, like little slithery helpers? A bizarre mental image flashes through your head. Medusa sitting cross-legged, eating grapes while the snakes deliver snacks like a weird ancient version of a lazy dinner party. You almost chuckle, but the sound dies in your throat as the air shifts again, cooler, almost damp, and you wonder, did Medusa ever leave her cave? Did she miss the sun on her face? The sound of the sea? The feel of sand beneath her feet? Did she remember what it felt like to laugh, or to brush her hair, or to dance under the stars without worrying about turning someone to stone? Historians, still argue whether Medusa was a recluse by choice or by necessity, whether she withdrew to protect others, or simply because the world had no place for a woman who broke the rules. You stop, standing still as a statue, hopefully not literally, and let the quiet wash over you. A faint drip echoes somewhere deep in the cave, and the air smells like old earth and the faint metallic tang of time itself. You imagine the weight of the snakes, their constant presence, a crown of movement, always shifting, always reminding you that you are not like everyone else. You feel the ground beneath you, solid and ancient, and you think about the people who once believed in these stories, who told them around fires, who carved them into stone. They must have wondered too about the woman with the snakes for hair, what it meant, what it felt like, whether the snakes whispered secrets to her in the dark. Maybe they did. Maybe they still do. The torch dips low, casting a final flicker of light across the cave wall, and you catch a glimpse of a carving that makes you pause. A face, half smiling, half terrifying, surrounded by a halo of snakes. It's not a monster's face. It's something more complicated. Something sad, maybe. You tilt your head, trying to see what the artist saw, but the torch sputters and the image fades into the darkness. You hold your breath for a moment, as if the cave itself is waiting for you to ask the right question, like a riddle you haven't quite cracked yet. The torch crackles in your hand, and the light flutters across the stone like a butterfly that's had too much to drink. You lower it slightly, and the flickering glow catches the edge of a smooth surface, a piece of polished bronze embedded in the wall, half hidden by centuries of dust. You brush it gently, and for a fleeting second, your own reflection stares back at you, wide-eyed, as if even your image is nervous to be here. And you wonder, what was Medusa's hair really like? We always imagine a writhing mess of vipers, hissing and spitting, poised to strike. But what if it wasn't quite that? Dramatic? Ancient Greek artists couldn't seem to agree. In some depictions, her hair is a wild, tangled mass of snakes so chaotic it makes your own bedhead look like a magazine spread. In others, the snakes are more like ornaments, delicate curls, woven through her locks like braids, almost beautiful, in a strange, unsettling way. Some ancient statues show her looking fierce and monstrous, eyes wide, tongue lolling out like a party trick gone wrong. Others, especially later Roman versions, soften her features, almost making her look serene, calm even, as if she's accepted her fate, or maybe just grown tired of the drama. Historians still argue whether these softer depictions were a sign of cultural shifts. Maybe the Romans thought she was more of a misunderstood victim than a terrifying monster. Or whether it was just a case of, let's make her prettier so she'll sell better on vases. It's not like they had focus groups back then. You step back, the image of Medusa's face still lingering in your mind, and it occurs to you, nobody really knows what she looked like. Not exactly. Maybe even she didn't know. Mirrors were rare and expensive in ancient Greece, and most people probably didn't get to see their reflection all that often. Imagine going through your whole life not quite sure how you look, except for the occasional glimpse in a puddle or a polished shield. It's kind of like those awkward phone camera moments when you open it accidentally and catch yourself at a weird angle, except, all the time. And then there's the question of the snakes themselves. Were they venomous? Did they strike at her enemies, or were they just there for show? Maybe they whispered secrets into her ears while she slept, or maybe they were just as confused as everyone else. Snakes, after all, aren't exactly known for their deep philosophical musings. You picture them hissing quietly to each other like, "Hey Frank, do you know why we're on this lady's head?" "No idea, Gary, just keep slithering." The torchlight flickers again, and you can almost imagine it. Medusa sitting alone, brushing her snakes absent-mindedly, trying not to think about how it all went so wrong. Maybe she tried braiding them. Maybe she gave them names. Larry, Susan, Twinkletoes. Maybe she sang them lullabies when they got restless. Or maybe she just let them be, accepting them as part of her, as inevitable as the stars. You take a step forward, careful to avoid a tangle of vines that look suspiciously like a snake. The air smells faintly of moss, and you can hear the distant drip of water echoing through the cave's chambers. You pause to think about the ancient artists who tried to capture Medusa's image, chipping away at marble, painting on vases, drawing lines that would outlast their own names. Some of them made her terrifying, eyes bulging, mouth twisted in rage. Others made her almost human. A sad, lonely figure caught in the middle of a story she never asked for. And you think, maybe that's the point. Maybe Medusa wasn't meant to have one single look. Maybe her story is like a mirror itself, reflecting back whatever the viewer brings to it. Fear, fascination, pity, awe. Maybe she's a little bit of all of those things. A woman transformed into a legend. Her hair a swirling, hissing symbol of how beauty and danger can get tangled up together. You feel the cool, damp air brush against your skin, and your eyes grow heavy as the cave seems to stretch and sigh around you. The shapes on the walls blur, the torchlight dances, and you think, just for a moment, that you see a flicker of movement, a coil of hair, or is it a snake, curling lazily across a distant ledge? It's hard to tell, and honestly, it doesn't really matter. Medusa's story is a story of transformation, of questions without answers, of a woman whose hair wasn't just for looks. It was a reminder that sometimes beauty bites back. You step carefully over a small, jagged rock, though part of you wonders if it's really a rock or just a fragment of a statue that used to be a person, frozen in time after one unfortunate glance. The snakes, you think, are unusually quiet now. Maybe they're listening too, curious to hear what you'll discover next. Your torch's light dances across the damp cave walls, casting long shadows that stretch and curl like coiled ribbons. And it makes you think, snakes weren't always scary. In fact, they were kind of the it creatures of the ancient world, especially in Greek culture. Take Asclepius, for instance. Remember him? The god of medicine and healing, the guy with the staff wrapped in a single snake, the same symbol you'll still see outside hospitals today. Ancient Greeks thought snakes had the power to heal, to bring life and fertility. They were often kept in temples dedicated to healing, slithering lazily across the marble floors while worshippers offered gifts. Not exactly the image you'd expect for a creature that later became synonymous with danger and fear. Historians still argue whether this reverence for snakes was based on practical observations, like how snakes shed their skin and seem reborn, or whether it was more about the fear of their venom and an attempt to appease that danger by turning it into a symbol of divine power. And here's a fun little fact to slither into your dreams tonight. Some ancient Greeks actually wore snake jewelry. Tiny golden snakes coiled around their arms, wrists, even their ears. So when you think about Medusa's hair, it wasn't just a nightmare hairdo. It was a full-on fashion statement, albeit one that came with a few extra hissing sound effects. You pause near a small pile of rubble, tilting your head as the torchlight reveals what looks like an old clay oil lamp, half buried in the dust. You imagine someone dropping it here long ago, maybe a temple servant or a curious traveler, their footsteps long faded, but the lamp still whispering stories in the dark. And as you stand there, you can't help but wonder how people in Medusa's time really saw her. Was she a figure of dread? A terrifying warning etched onto shields and temple walls? Or was she a protective force, a symbol of fierce feminine energy that guarded sacred spaces? You glance up, and the faintest movement catches your eye. A small snake, greenish and sleek, winding its way along a rocky ledge, tongue flickering as if tasting your curiosity. It moves without fear, weaving between stones like it belongs here, as if this place is a sanctuary, not a prison. Maybe Medusa's lair wasn't just a gloomy cave. Maybe it was her temple, a place where the snakes were guardians, where the air shimmered with the quiet power of things that can't be neatly explained. You can almost hear the quiet hum of ancient chants, the soft clatter of beads, the shuffle of sandaled feet on stone. Maybe people once came here not to fear Medusa, but to honor her, to ask for protection, healing, or a little extra luck in their love lives. After all, in some versions of the myth, Medusa wasn't always a monster. She was a priestess, a devotee of Athena, a woman who served the goddess until fate and a certain sea god's questionable decisions intervened. And here's where the story gets tangled, like a nest of snakes curling tighter and tighter. Because some ancient sources hint that Medusa's transformation wasn't just a punishment, it was a twisted sort of gift, a way to protect herself from men who couldn't keep their hands, or their gods, off her. A shield, in a sense, woven right into her being. A warning to those who thought beauty meant weakness. You crouch down, tracing a faint carving in the stone, a swirling line that might be a snake or a river, or maybe just an ancient artist's doodle. The snakes seem to watch you now, their eyes unblinking, their heads swaying ever so slightly. And you wonder, did they whisper secrets to Medusa? Did they tell her stories of the underworld, of heroes who would come and fail, of gods who couldn't resist meddling? Or did they just hiss quietly, offering the comfort of their presence in the dark? Your breath slows, the cave air wrapping around you like a soft blanket, heavy and still. The torch's flame dances low, casting a warm glow that makes the shadows flicker like the snakes themselves. And you think, what if Medusa wasn't meant to be a monster? What if she was a guardian, a protector of sacred knowledge, of the wild places where snakes and humans both held power? Historians still argue whether the Greeks saw her as a warning or a symbol of untamed feminine force. Maybe the truth is, somewhere in the middle, coiled in the quiet space between fear and reverence. The snake on the ledge flicks its tongue again, and you take a slow, deep breath, feeling your own heartbeat settle. The air smells like old stone, faintly metallic, and maybe just a hint of something green and alive. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the cave hold you in its hush, and you wonder, what stories have been lost in these shadows? What secrets whispered by snakes have slipped through the cracks of time, waiting for someone like you to listen? You open your eyes, blinking slowly as if shaking off a dream, and the cave around you seems to breathe in sync with your heartbeat. The air pulses gently, like a memory stirring, and you get the distinct feeling that you're not alone, at least not in the way you usually think of alone. The snakes, the stone fragments, the old carvings, they all seem to lean in, as if they've been waiting for you to ask the next question. And that question, of course, is about Medusa's sisters. You probably didn't know she had sisters, right? Most people don't. Medusa tends to hog the spotlight with her snake hair and that whole turning people to stone hobby. But she wasn't the only Gorgon slithering around ancient Greece. Her sisters, Stheno and Euryale, are like the side characters in a movie who never get their own spin-off but are secretly way more interesting than the lead. They're the original forgotten siblings, lost in the shadows of Medusa's more famous myth. Stheno, the eldest, was said to be the strongest of the three. Her name literally means strength, which is a solid resume builder when your family is already pretty terrifying. Some stories describe her as wild, ferocious, and basically impossible to kill. Like that friend who survives every camping trip no matter how many times they trip over their own tent. Euryale, the middle sister, had a name that meant far-roaming, suggesting she was the adventurous one. Maybe a little restless, maybe a little dreamy. And here's the kicker. Unlike Medusa, both Stheno and Euryale were immortal. So while Medusa could be, and eventually was, defeated, her sisters were, well, eternal. Which raises an interesting point. Why is Medusa the one everyone remembers? Historians still argue whether the Gorgon sisters were always part of the story, or if they were added later, kind of like bonus features in a mythological director's cut. Some say the trio represents different aspects of fear, strength, chaos, and transformation. Others think they were just convenient storytelling tools, to make Medusa seem less like a random anomaly and more like part of a whole species of terrifying creatures. And then there's the fringe theory that maybe, just maybe, the Gorgons were originally goddesses themselves, ancient deities of nature and chaos who got demoted to monsters when the Olympians took over. Classic case of rebranding, really. You step around a low stone outcrop. The torches glow, casting long shadows that seem to curl and twist across the walls like the tails of snakes slithering in slow motion. The air feels cooler here, almost damp, and you notice a faint shimmer on the cave floor. Maybe water, maybe something else. You crouch down, and for a second, you imagine the sisters here. Stheno, fierce and wild-eyed, maybe sharpening a stone. Dagger, Euryale, her gaze distant, tracing patterns in the dust. And Medusa, quieter, sitting with her snakes curling gently around her, half listening, half lost in thought. Did they whisper to each other? Share stories of the mortals who stumbled into their lair? Did they argue about who had the best hair day? You'll never know, but it's fun to imagine. And here's a quirky tidbit. In some ancient art, the Gorgons aren't terrifying at all. They're kind of goofy, tongues sticking out, big round eyes, hair that looks more like party streamers than deadly snakes. It's like the ancient version of a meme that got a little out of hand. One moment, they're fierce. The next, they're grinning like cartoon mascots. Maybe the artists were just having fun. Or maybe they were trying to make a point. That fear, when you look at it closely, can sometimes be ridiculous. You lean back, feeling the rough stone at your back, and wonder what it would have been like to be one of the Gorgon sisters. Immortal, eternal, feared and worshipped in equal measure. Did they grow tired of it all? Did they ever wish for a quiet life, free from the weight of legends and the constant stream of heroes showing up to prove themselves? You imagine Euryale sighing dramatically while Stheno mutters something about another idiot with a sword. And Medusa? Maybe she just wanted to be left alone to sit quietly with her snakes and dream of simpler days. The torchlight flickers, the shadows lengthen, and for a moment, it feels like the sisters are still here, watching, waiting, maybe even smirking. At your curiosity, you shift, your eyelids growing heavier, the cave's slow, steady rhythm lulling you into a kind of trance. The air smells faintly of damp earth, snake scales, and the ancient dust of forgotten stories. You close your eyes for just a moment, letting the hum of the cave settle into your bones, and you think, maybe the real story of the Gorgons isn't about monsters or heroes or curses. Maybe it's about sisters, strange, powerful, complicated, holding onto each other in the dark, waiting for someone to finally see them. You open your eyes slowly, the flicker of the torchlight dancing across the walls like little glowing eyes watching from the dark. The snakes have gone still, coiled up on the rocks and ledges, their heads resting on themselves as if they, too, are pausing for a moment. And then you hear it, the faintest sound of footsteps, not yours, lighter, more deliberate. The hair on the back of your neck prickles, and you turn your head just enough to catch a glint of metal in the shadows. A sword. It's him, Perseus, the so-called hero. You watch him step cautiously into the cave, muscles tense, breathing shallow. His bronze shield gleams faintly in the torchlight, polished to a mirror shine. He's gripping a short, wickedly curved sword, probably way too tightly, if you're honest. The cave seems to hush around him, the snakes lifting their heads, tongues flickering. You can almost hear their collective thought. Really? This guy? Perseus moves carefully, the crunch of his sandals on the cave floor sounding absurdly loud in the stillness. His eyes dart everywhere, at the stone figures half buried in dust, at the shadows that seem to curl and twist, at the faint glimmer of scales. You wonder what's going through his head. Is he thinking about the glory waiting for him if he succeeds? About the king who sent him on this quest as a death sentence wrapped in a favor? Or is he thinking about his mother, Danae, who needed a champion? Historians still argue whether Perseus was a true hero, brave, clever, chosen by the gods, or just a guy in the right place at the right time, bumbling through a series of lucky breaks. Probably a bit of both, you figure. And here's a fun fact for your sleepy brain. Perseus wasn't actually the first person to think of using a reflective surface to fight Medusa. Ancient mirrors, polished bronze or silver, not glass, were already used in various rituals, and the Greeks believed that reflections could hold power, even trap a soul. So when Perseus holds up that shield to avoid her gaze, it's not just a clever battle move. It's tapping into a deep, almost magical tradition, a blend of superstition and strategy, all rolled into one shiny surface. You watch as Perseus inches closer, his grip tightening on the sword, the shield angled just so. He's careful. You'll give him that. Not a single glance directly at Medusa. He's watching her through the polished bronze, a ghostly image shimmering back at him. You imagine the moment when he finally sees her, lying there, half asleep, maybe, or watching him with an expression that's more tired than terrifying. Maybe she knows what's coming. Maybe she's too exhausted to care. The torchlight flares as if in protest, and the cave seems to breathe in, waiting. You hear the faintest hiss, just one snake maybe, shifting lazily in its coils. Perseus steps forward again, and the moment stretches, taut as a bowstring. His reflection in the shield flickers, distorting her face just slightly. Eyes wide. Hair a nest of coiled, gleaming snakes. And you think, what did Medusa see in that final moment? Did she see a hero, or just another mortal with a sword, eyes full of fear and ambition? Did she think of her sisters, waiting somewhere far away? Did she remember the temple, the scent of olive oil lamps, the sound of prayers whispered in the dark? Your heart beats a little faster, though you know how the story ends. Perseus raises the sword, his shadow stretching long and thin on the wall, and in one swift, practiced motion, he swings. The air seems to shiver. The snakes hiss in a sudden, sharp chorus, and then silence. You exhale slowly, the weight of the story settling like a blanket around your shoulders. Perseus stands there, breathless, staring down at the now motionless head in the dust. The snakes, once alive and writhing, are still, their eyes dim. It's an eerie sight, more sad than triumphant, really. The hero has won, but at what cost? You wonder if he feels any guilt, or if he's too caught up in the thrill of victory to care. Historians still argue whether Perseus was the ultimate symbol of clever, mortal ingenuity, or just another pawn in the gods' games, doing their bidding with a shiny shield and a sharp blade. He bends down, carefully, almost reverently, and lifts Medusa's head by the hair, still a tangle of snakes. Now limp and cold, you can almost hear the soft whish as he tucks it into a sack, as if he's just grabbed a loaf of bread from the market. A hero's prize, neatly packaged. He glances around the cave, his gaze lingering for a moment on the stone figures scattered like forgotten toys. You wonder if he feels the weight of those lives, if he knows their names, or if they're just background scenery in his story. The torch in your hand flickers low, the flame curling down to a soft glow. The cave feels quieter now, heavier. You take a step back, careful not to disturb the dust, and you feel the hush settle over you like a sigh. Perseus turns, shield and sack in hand, and walks away, his footsteps fading into the dark. And you stand there, alone in the cave with the whispers of the snakes and the soft, lingering scent of old stone and cold metal, wondering, was this a victory? Or just another story waiting to be told again and again and again? You stand still, barely breathing, watching as Perseus's shadow disappears beyond the bend of the cave. His sandals scuff the stone floor, and then nothing. Just the soft, echoing drip of water somewhere deep in the rock and the faintest rustle of scales shifting against stone. So quiet, you're not even sure you heard it. The torch's glow dances in the dark, and you feel the space around you hum with a strange kind of emptiness, like the cave itself is holding its breath. And then it hits you. The mirror trick. That clever little piece of battlefield strategy that turned Perseus from a doomed mortal into a hero. It's the classic don't look directly at the monster move, and honestly, it feels kind of like cheating. You picture Perseus sneaking into a chess tournament with a smartphone hidden in his toga. But hey, it worked. Let's break it down. Though, the polished bronze shield, that was his ticket to survival. In an age before glass mirrors were a thing, shields like his were the closest you'd get to a reflection. Not exactly high definition, think less clear selfie, and more blurry blob that could be your face or a potato, but enough to give Perseus the edge he needed. Historians still argue whether the story of Perseus's mirror trick came from earlier myths, or whether it was a clever literary invention by ancient poets looking to make their heroes seem a little less reckless. After all, facing down a snake-haired woman who can turn you to stone with a glance, that's not a fight you win with brute strength alone. It's a game of wits, and Perseus, whether by his own smarts or with a little divine help, played it well. And that's the thing. Perseus didn't exactly go into this alone. The gods loved to meddle. Athena gave him the shield, polished to a mirror finish. Hermes lent him a magical sword sharp enough to cut through anything. Hades tossed in the cap of invisibility because, why not? And the nymphs, those nature spirits who are basically the Greek version of woodland fairies, handed over a special bag to carry Medusa's head. It's like an ancient version of a video game loot drop, and Perseus just happened to collect all the right gear. You imagine him walking into the cave, clanking like a kid at Halloween with way too much candy in his pockets, probably feeling a mix of excitement and sheer terror. You tilt your head, listening to the soft rhythmic drip in the distance, and you wonder, did Medusa even see him coming? Did she sense the flash of bronze reflecting her own face? Did the snakes hiss a warning, or did they fall silent, confused by the shimmer of their mistress's image in a polished surface? It's an eerie thought. Medusa, the woman who could freeze a man in place with a glance, undone by her own reflection. There's something almost poetic about it, isn't there? That the thing she used to destroy others became the very thing that destroyed her. Kind of like the ancient version of being undone by your own social media posts. And you wonder, was that Athena's plan all along? Historians still argue whether the gods orchestrated the whole thing, or if they just like to sit back and watch mortals scramble around like ants in a particularly chaotic ant farm. Your torch sputters, the flame shrinking for a moment before flaring up again, and the shadows on the wall ripple, almost like they're alive. You glance at the carvings again, the swirling lines, the snake-like curves, and it feels like they're telling the story back to you, echoing across the centuries. The cave holds its memories in the walls, in the stones, in the faint scent of old fear and forgotten victories. You let your fingers brush over the surface of a nearby rock, smooth and cool, with a faint, almost glassy sheen. You imagine it. Medusa's gaze, the flash of her eyes catching someone mid-step, their features frozen forever in shock or fear. The shield trick worked, but it wasn't just a clever angle or a lucky reflection. It was a way to see without seeing. A loophole in the rules of mortal versus monster combat. And maybe that's why the story stuck. Because it's not just a tale of brute force, but of finding a way around the impossible. You picture Perseus again, slipping away into the night, sack slung over his shoulder, Medusa's head swaying gently with each step. Did he feel triumphant, like a hero destined for greatness? Or was he quietly terrified, wondering if the head in his bag might still open its eyes and freeze him in place? You can almost hear the snake's last hiss, the soft swish of the blade, the quiet shuffle of Perseus's feet as he made his way back to the world beyond this cave. And you stand there, in the hush of the aftermath, the torchlight casting long, lazy shadows, and think, the mirror trick wasn't just about survival. It was about looking without really looking, about finding a way to face what you fear without being swallowed by it. And isn't that a lesson we all need sometimes? Your eyelids grow heavier, the hum of the cave settling into your bones, and you wonder, if you had a mirror like that, what would you choose to see? You take a slow, deep breath, the cave air cool against your skin, as if the walls themselves are exhaling in relief, now that the story has taken its inevitable turn. The torchlight dips low, shadows pooling thickly in the corners, and you feel the quiet weight of it all pressing down. Like the whole cave has been holding on to this moment for centuries, waiting for someone to stand here, to feel the story beneath their feet. You glance at the empty space where Perseus had stood, sack in hand, and you can almost hear the soft, faint slither of the snakes, their hiss fading into silence. And then you think about what happens next. Because Perseus doesn't just slink back to his island with a bag of snake-haired vengeance and call it a day. No, he shows off. I mean, wouldn't you? He heads back towards civilization, probably exhausted, probably a little smug, and definitely still carrying Medusa's head, like a really creepy souvenir from a vacation you definitely wouldn't recommend. And when he finally reaches King Polydectes, the same guy who sent him on this impossible quest in the first place, Perseus pulls out the head like a magician's big reveal. Ta-da, here's your monster. Except, of course, it's not a prop. It's still Medusa's head, and it still has the power to freeze a person mid-breath, which is, let's be honest, A pretty extreme way to make a point. King Polydectes and his court take one look, and that's all it takes. They're statues now, frozen forever, caught mid-sentence. Probably some guy with his mouth hanging open, and another one holding a goblet mid-toast. Talk about awkward party photos. And here's a fun little detail to rattle around in your mind as you drift deeper into the story. In some versions of the myth, Perseus doesn't just use Medusa's head as a personal defense system. He whips it out whenever he's in a bind, turning enemies into stone left and right. It's like having a one-shot video game power-up that you can't resist spamming, even when you're not supposed to. Historians still argue whether this whole head-in-a-bag thing was meant to symbolize the ultimate weapon of fear, or if it was just the ancient equivalent of carrying around a very, very effective emergency whistle. Either way, you have to wonder, did the head ever accidentally turn someone to stone? Did Perseus ever peek in the bag by mistake? Your mind drifts as the torchlight flickers and dances across the walls, and you picture Medusa's head, silent now, her eyes closed, or maybe half open, just a thin sliver of light catching in those petrifying pupils. The snakes, you imagine, twitching faintly in their sleep, curling and uncurling around themselves. Maybe they dream too. Dream of the days before they were part of her hair, when they were wild and free, basking on sun-warmed rocks. Or maybe they dream of stone gardens, frozen figures caught forever in a moment of fear and awe. You shuffle your feet, careful not to trip over a small, jagged stone that might just be a toe or a piece of someone's tunic forever stiffened into rock. The cave feels heavier now, filled with the weight of what's been done. You imagine the slow, cold realization sinking into Perseus as he looks around at the sea of statues. People, once warm and laughing and breathing, now just gone. And you wonder, was he proud, relieved? Or did a tiny voice in the back of his mind whisper, "What have you done?" The torch crackles, casting flickering patterns that twist and shift like tiny, restless snakes. And you think about the power Medusa's head held, even after her death. A head in a bag, sure, but it changed everything. It turned a simple man with a sword into a living weapon. It let Perseus save his mother, defeat his enemies, and win the admiration of gods and mortals alike. And it makes you wonder, was Medusa ever really gone? Or did a part of her live on, in the snakes that hissed in that bag, in the terrified eyes of those who saw her face and felt their breath catch forever? Historians still argue whether the whole head-in-a-bag story was a metaphor for the lingering power of fear, or just an ancient version of a portable curse. But you can't shake the feeling that it's both. That Medusa's story isn't just about a woman with snakes for hair, or a hero with a sword and a shiny shield. It's about what happens when we carry fear around with us, when we trap it in a bag thinking we can control it, only to realize that it still has the power to shape the world around us in ways we can't predict. Your eyelids grow heavier, the torches glow, softening into a quiet, golden haze. The cave hums gently, a low, steady breath that wraps around you like a blanket. You feel the weight of the story settling into your bones, the hush of ancient stone pressing close. And as you drift, you wonder, what would you have done if you were Perseus? Would you have opened the bag just to peek? The air feels different now, cooler maybe, or just a little heavier, like the cave itself is holding its breath. You shift your weight, the stone floor firm beneath your feet, and the torch's warm light flickers across a patch of lichen growing. In the cracks, tiny green tendrils stretching upward as if reaching for a sun they'll never feel. And as you stand there, still half dreaming of Medusa's severed head in that bag, you start to think about something even stranger. The stories that grew from Medusa's blood. Yeah, you heard that right. Her blood. You'd think once a person, or, well, a Gorgon, loses her head, the story's pretty much wrapped up. But nope, not in Greek mythology. Medusa's body wasn't just a lifeless, tragic end to a story. It was like a piñata of strange and magical consequences. In some versions of the myth, when her blood dripped onto the earth, coral grew in the place where it fell. Coral. That red, branching treasure of the sea, prized by ancient jewelers and merchants, was supposedly born from the blood of a snake-haired woman who could turn men to stone. Makes you wonder if wearing a coral necklace is like carrying a tiny bit of Medusa's power around your neck. Elegant and mildly unsettling, and that's not even the weirdest part. The Greeks believed that Medusa's blood had different properties depending on where it came from. Blood from the left side of her body. Deadly poison. 1 drop could kill you. Blood from the right side. A miraculous cure, capable of healing sickness and even bringing the dead back to life. Historians still argue whether this was a way to explain ancient beliefs about the dual nature of life and death, or just a convenient plot device for when heroes needed a quick fix. Either way, it's a fascinating detail that turns Medusa from just a monster into something much more. A figure tied to life, death, and everything in between. You imagine it now. Perseus, standing on a rocky shore, the bag with Medusa's head at his side, as droplets of her blood fall to the ground. Maybe he watches in awe as the earth bubbles and churns, tiny branches of coral sprouting where the blood touches the sea foam. Maybe he doesn't even notice, too busy marching off to his next adventure. Or maybe he pauses for just a moment, the weight of what he's done sinking in as the snakes inside the bag twitch faintly, as if they still have secrets left to share. And then there's the whole thing about the Gorgonean. That's the name for Medusa's head when it's used. As a symbol, like a logo, but much scarier, the Greeks plastered the Gorgonean on shields, breastplates, doorways, and even coins, as if to say, hey, don't mess with us, we've got this on our side. It was a talisman, a charm of protection, and it wasn't just about scaring off enemies. It was about warding off evil. You can picture it now, a merchant hanging a small Medusa head carving above his shop entrance, or a soldier etching it onto his shield before heading into battle. The Gorgonean wasn't just a reminder of Medusa's death, it was a symbol of her enduring power. And then there's the question of whether Medusa's blood really had those magical properties, or if it was more of a poetic idea, an ancient metaphor for how something deadly can also be a source of life. Maybe it's both. Maybe Medusa was a symbol of the untamed, dangerous side of nature, the side that can kill you or heal you, depending on the circumstances. Historians still argue whether the blood stories were a way of softening her image, turning her from pure monster into something more complex, or if they were just a creative flourish tacked on to make the myth even weirder. You picture it now, a drop of Medusa's blood falling from Perseus's sword, hitting the earth, and poof, a flower blooms, or a snake slithers away, or a tiny coral branch unfurls beneath the waves. It's an image that lingers, quiet and strange, like a secret whispered in the dark. The torch's glow softens, the shadows stretching long across the cave floor, and the air feels thick with the weight of stories layered over stories, each untangled into the next like Medusa's snakes curling together in sleep. You wonder how many more details have been lost to time, how many whispers faded before they could be carved into stone or inked onto papyrus. Your eyelids droop, the steady drip of water somewhere in the distance like a metronome for your slowing thoughts. The snakes on the walls, the carvings, the echoes, they all seem to murmur the same thing. Medusa's story didn't end when Perseus swung his sword. It rippled outward, in coral branches and whispered charms, in the shimmer of coins and the sway of sea plants, in the faintest hush of the wind curling through the caves of the world. And maybe, just maybe, it's still rippling now, curling softly into the edges of your dreams. Your breathing slows, the torchlight growing dimmer, almost like the flame itself is beginning to nod off. The shadows stretch wider, yawning across the stone walls, and your footsteps echo gently, soft and hesitant, as if even the cave is growing sleepy. And then, like a whisper breaking the quiet, you remember. Medusa wasn't done yet. Even in death, she had one final absurdly unexpected trick left up her sleeve. Or well, in this case, her neck. Because when Perseus swung that sword and severed Medusa's head, something completely ridiculous happened. From her neck, as if she were some mythological piñata, out popped a winged horse. Yep, you heard that right, Pegasus. The horse of legend. The white stallion, with wings like soft, billowing sails, galloped straight out of her severed neck, as if this whole story wasn't already weird enough. And not just Pegasus either. According to some versions of the myth, a second figure sprang from her body too. A giant named Chrysaor, whose name means golden sword. Historians still argue whether Chrysaor was meant to symbolize something, or if he was just a bonus character the poets threw in for extra flair. But Pegasus, he became a legend all his own. Beloved, celebrated, and oddly disconnected from the messy, tragic story of his mother. You can't help but imagine it. The silent moment after Medusa's head falls, the torchlight catching the faint shimmer of something shifting in the shadows, and then, poof! A horse, wings unfurling like sails catching a breeze, emerging from the darkness, hooves clicking against the stone floor. It's almost funny, isn't it? As if the universe said, well, this is getting grim, so let's lighten the mood with a magical horse. You picture Perseus, eyes wide, probably thinking, wait, what? And honestly, who could blame him? He came for a monster's head, and now there's a flying horse prancing around the cave like it's auditioning for a very niche parade. The ancient Greeks, of course, loved this kind of thing. To them, myths were layered, tangled, and bursting, with surprises. Nothing was ever just one story. So, when Medusa's death birthed a winged horse, it wasn't just random nonsense, it was symbolic. Pegasus represented inspiration, freedom, the soaring spirit that escapes tragedy. Or at least, that's what some scholars say. Others think the whole thing was a later addition. Maybe some ancient poet thought, hey, this myth could use more pizzazz, and added a horse with wings for good measure. Either way, Pegasus became a star. He flew across the skies, carried heroes like Bellerophon on daring quests, and eventually found a cozy spot in the stars as a constellation. Medusa, on the other hand, she didn't get that kind of glow-up. Her head got slapped onto shields and coins, her story twisted into a cautionary tale, her name whispered like a warning. And you have to wonder, how did she feel about that? Did she know in that last flicker of consciousness that her body would give birth to something so beautiful and free, while her own image would be used to scare people into submission? The torch flame flickers lower, the shadows stretching long and thin like the wings of Pegasus himself, gliding across the cave walls. The snakes, quiet now, seem to curl into themselves, their scales blending into the dark like forgotten echoes. You think of the strange juxtaposition. Medusa, the monster, giving life to a creature so noble and admired. It's almost as if the universe couldn't bear to let her story end in tragedy alone. It had to throw in a twist, a spark of beauty born from horror. And you wonder, did the poets of old mean for this to say something about creation and destruction? About how even the darkest stories can birth something bright and new? Or was it just another piece of myth-making, a way to keep audiences on their toes, waiting for the next strange and unexpected moment? Historians still argue whether Pegasus was a gift to Perseus, a symbol of divine favor, or simply an ancient version of plot twist that kept the listeners leaning in closer around the fire. You picture Pegasus now, wings unfurled, the faint shimmer of moonlight catching on his feathers, hooves clattering against the rocks as he lifts off. Graceful, silent, impossible, and below him, the quiet cave, the snake-haired woman stilled forever, her story curling around you like the coils of her hair, waiting for someone, maybe you, to remember it all. Your eyelids grow heavier, the torches glow soft and low, and the faintest breeze stirs the dust in the air. You think of Medusa, of the snakes, of the winged horse that took flight from her end, and you wonder, is this how myths are born? A flash of light, a burst of wings, and a story that refuses to be forgotten. The torch's glow feels softer now, flickering like a heartbeat in the dark, and you shift your weight slowly, careful not to disturb the hush that has settled over the cave. The air is thick with the scent of old stone and distant stories, faint, whispers that brush against your ears like a breeze you can almost feel. And as you breathe in, you start to notice something. Medusa's story wasn't just a tale of tragedy or heroics. It became a a symbol that lingered. Because even after her death, even after the gods had their fun, and Perseus went off to brag about his shiny new head in a bag, Medusa's image stuck around. She wasn't just a monster tucked away in one dusty myth. No, she became something bigger. A warning, a shield, a conversation starter. You think of the Gorgonean again, her face stamped on shields, carved into temple doorways, painted on pottery. Not as a sad reminder of a woman who once had hair like silk and a temple to her name, but as a fierce, wide-eyed protector. She's there to scare off evil, to glare down misfortune, to guard the threshold between chaos and order. It's almost funny, isn't it? The very woman who was punished, feared, and ultimately destroyed ends up being the face people use to protect themselves. You imagine it now, an ancient Greek soldier etching Medusa's face onto his shield before heading into battle. Maybe he mutters a quick prayer under his breath, hoping her frozen stare will freeze his enemies too. Maybe he looks at the wide eyes, the twisted hissing hair, and thinks, I could use some of that energy right about now. Historians still argue whether this use of Medusa's image was an act of reverence, fear, or sheer practicality. Was it meant to honor her power, or was it just a handy way to spook enemies on the battlefield? Some say the Gorgonean wasn't really about Medusa at all. It was about fear itself. The idea that if you could look fear in the eye, literally, you could control it. Others believe the image was a quiet nod to the feminine, the chaotic, the wild power of nature that no sword could tame. You shift your torch, casting the light higher, and see faint etchings along the wall. Spirals, eyes, maybe even snakes, half faded, as if the cave itself tried to remember but couldn't quite hold on to the details. It makes you wonder how many other stories have slipped away like that, leaving only traces in the dust. And then there's the quiet irony of it all. Medusa's face, the same one that once turned mortals to stone, now used as a charm to ward off evil. Her power repackaged, sanitized, turned into an accessory you could wear around your neck or carve into your front door. It's like taking a lion's roar and bottling it as a perfume. You can almost hear Medusa sighing, a tired, snake-hissing kind of sigh, as if to say, really? This is what you did with my legacy? But here's the thing, Medusa was powerful. Whether she asked for it or not, whether she wanted it or not, she became a symbol of untouchable, wild power. The kind of power that makes people whisper in the dark and hang charms on their walls just in case. And you wonder, did she ever? Think about that while she was alive, before the snakes, before the curse. Did she know she would become a story, a warning, a face etched into stone? Your eyes drift closed for a moment. The warmth of the torch wrapping around you like a blanket, and you think about the women who came after her, the ones who wore Medusa's face as a charm, who looked at her and saw not just a monster but a reminder. Be careful who you anger, be careful who you trust, be careful how much power you hold, because someone, somewhere, will try to take it from you. The cave feels heavier now, the air thick with the scent of ancient stone, and you imagine Medusa's wide, frozen eyes watching you, not in anger, not even in warning, just watching, as if waiting for you to understand something that no words can quite explain. Your eyelids flutter, your breath slowing, and you wonder, what does it mean, really, to carry a monster's face into battle? To wear it as a charm against evil? Maybe it means that sometimes the only way to face fear is to wear it proudly. Let it stare back at the world, unblinking, unashamed. The snakes seem to shift faintly in the dark, curling closer, the sound of their scales soft and steady, like rain against stone. The torch flickers lower, and the shadows stretch wider, wrapping the cave, and you, into the quiet hush of a story that refuses to fade. Your eyes drift half-closed, the torch a soft golden whisper in your hand, its glow curling across the cave walls like the last flicker of a dream. The air is heavy now, but not oppressive, more like a weighted blanket of old stories, curling around you, holding you in place. And in that hush, your thoughts wander, because Medusa's image didn't just stick around in Greece. Oh no, it traveled. It changed. It morphed. By the time the Romans got their hands on her legend, Medusa wasn't just a scary monster anymore. She was art, decor, a conversation piece at your garden party. Statues of Medusa began to pop up in public spaces, tucked into mosaics, carved onto fountains. You can picture it, can't you? A stately Roman villa with a courtyard featuring Medusa's face at the center. Marble, serene, her snakes arranged in delicate, stylized curls. Not hissing, not lunging, just there. A stone expression, calm and oddly beautiful. It's a far cry from the snarling, wide-eyed terror of earlier depictions. Somewhere along the line, Medusa's terrifying edge dulled, smoothed out by time, and taste and the changing whims of art collectors. She went from nightmare fuel to home decor, like some ancient version of that live, laugh, love sign hanging in your aunt's kitchen. Historians still argue whether this softening of Medusa's image was a deliberate act of cultural rebranding, turning something once feared into something more palatable, or whether it was just the inevitable erosion that happens when a story gets retold too many times, the sharp bits worn smooth by repetition. You picture a Roman merchant admiring a mosaic for his villa's entryway, squinting at the artist's sketch. Ah yes, make the snakes a bit more elegant, and the eyes less terrifying, more thoughtful. It's almost absurd. The very face that once froze men in their tracks now turned into a conversation piece. Oh, you like the tile work? That's Medusa, of course. Really keeps the evil spirits out. Very trendy this season. And it wasn't just Roman homes. Medusa's softened image crept into coins, into jewelry, into tiny charms you could wear on a chain around your neck. Imagine that, an entire industry of miniature Medusas, swinging gently from necklaces, tucked into pockets, stitched onto clothing. Not so much a symbol of raw, untouchable power anymore, more like a fashionable nod to protection, a hint of edgy style. You wonder how Medusa would have felt about all this. Would she have been amused to see her fierce, terrifying face reduced to a polished, stylized icon? Or would she have felt erased? The sharpness of her story filed down into something safe and pretty, stripped of its bite, its rage, its messy, complicated truth. The torchlight shifts, casting long shadows across the walls, and you catch a glimpse of an old carving, faint, worn, but unmistakable. A face framed by curling lines that might once have been snakes, now softened into delicate swirls. A Medusa, yes, but tamed, almost gentle. You think about all the ways her story was told and retold, shaped by the hands of artists and the imaginations of poets. You think about how her name was whispered in fear, then etched into marble, then sold as trinkets in dusty market stalls. And you wonder, did anyone remember the woman behind the monster? The priestess in Athena's temple, the beauty who caught a god's eye, the victim of a curse spun by jealous hands? Or did they only see the surface, the image, the face frozen forever in stone? Historians still argue whether Medusa's transformation from monster to ornament was a sign of cultural progress or just another way to strip power from a dangerous, unruly figure. Was it a way to reclaim her, to make her less scary? Or was it a way to silence her story, to turn her into a pretty pattern on a floor while forgetting what she once was? The torch dips lower, the flame shrinking, and the cave hums around you. A slow, steady breath that seems to carry the weight of all. Those Medusas, the fierce one, the sad one, the ornamental one, they layer over each other like faint images in a dream, and you feel them watching, waiting, maybe even smiling just a little at the absurdity of it all. Your eyelids droop, the flicker of the torch like a lullaby in the dark, and you think, Medusa wasn't just a monster or a cautionary tale or a pretty design on a Roman fountain. She was a woman, a symbol, a story that kept shifting, kept curling back on itself like a snake in the sand. And maybe, just maybe, she still is, lurking in the shadows, watching as her face is drawn again and again, waiting for someone to remember the whole, messy, complicated truth. The torchlight shivers, and the snakes seem to shift ever so slightly, coiling in the dark, waiting for you to close your eyes and let the story settle in your bones. The torchlight dips lower still, the flame curling inward like a sleepy breath, casting soft golden waves that flicker across the walls. Snakes, swirls, eyes that seem to open and close with the rhythm of your breathing. The air feels thicker, now, but not in a way that weighs you down. More like a heavy blanket draped over your thoughts, lulling them into a slow, contented drift. And as you sink deeper into the cave's quiet, you start to think, Medusa wasn't the only one with strange hair stories. In fact, hair in mythology, it's a whole thing. You ever notice that? The Greeks, the Romans, even other ancient cultures, they were obsessed with hair. Tangled, flowing, golden, black, coiled like snakes, straight like a waterfall. Hair wasn't just hair. It was power, identity, beauty, danger, magic. It could change your fate, mark you as divine, or ruin your life entirely. Take Samson from the Hebrew Bible. His strength was literally tied to his hair. Cut it off, and he lost everything. Or think of the Norse goddess Sif, whose golden hair was so prized that when Loki, the trickster, cut it as a prank, he had to have magical dwarves forge her a new set of hair out of gold. Even the Egyptians got in on the hair obsession. Pharaohs wore elaborate wigs not just for fashion, but as a symbol of status and divine authority. And let's not forget the fairy tale world, Rapunzel, with her impossibly long hair used as a ladder, or the idea that a single hair can tangle your destiny like threads in a loom. It makes you wonder, what is it about hair? Why does it carry so much meaning? Historians still argue whether hair's symbolic weight came from simple practicality like, it's visible, it grows, it changes, or whether it was something deeper. Maybe hair became a stand-in for life itself. It grows when you're alive, withers when you're sick, and stops altogether when you're gone. Maybe that's why cutting hair could feel like a sacrifice, a shedding of identity, a sign of mourning, or even an offering to the gods. You shift your torch, casting its glow upward toward a faint carving in the stone. A swirling pattern that almost looks like braids, or maybe twisting vines, or maybe snakes. The lines blur together, and you imagine Medusa standing there, running her fingers through her hair, before the curse when it was long and soft, catching the light like polished obsidian. You imagine her laughing maybe, or tying it back before starting her temple duties. And then you picture her after. The snakes alive, restless, always hissing, always watching. Did she brush them, or did they tangle themselves? Did they curl up when she slept? Did she name them? You can't help but think of someone brushing their cat's fur at night, humming quietly. Maybe Medusa did the same with her snakes, each one a quiet companion in the darkness. Hair, you realize, is more than just hair. It's memory, power, identity. It's why heroes lose it when they're humbled, why lovers stroke it in moments of tenderness, why cultures wrap it in cloth, oil it, braid it, cut it, or let it flow free. And Medusa's hair? Well, it wasn't just for looks. It was a symbol, a warning, a crown, a curse, a mark of her power. You imagine the artists who tried to capture her, some painting wild, writhing snakes that hiss off the page, others drawing them like delicate curls, almost ornamental. You think of the poets trying to describe her hair in words that both awe and terrify. And you think of the people who wore her image, etched onto shields, painted onto walls, not just as a monster, but as a reminder of what can happen when beauty, power, and fear twist together. Your torch dips lower, the flame now a faint glow, like the last ember in a hearth fire. The shadows of the snakes seem to soften, curling into themselves, and you feel the story settling around you. Medusa's hair, yes, but also all the hair of myth, a tapestry woven from golden strands, dark coils, hissing scales, and whispered dreams. Your eyelids grow heavier, and you breathe in the cool, ancient air, feeling it settle in your lungs like a soft sigh. The torch flickers, and you wonder if you could brush your fingers through Medusa's hair, would it feel like snakes? Or like the soft, silken threads of a story too tangled to ever fully unravel? The air hums quietly, like a lullaby in the dark, and you feel the weight of it all. The myths, the memories, the long, slow drift of time, curling gently into the edges of your dreams. The torch's glow is almost gone now, just a faint, sleepy ember that flickers low on the wall, casting the softest curls of light across the rough stone. Your breath feels slower, heavier, like the air itself has thickened, and the shadows of the snakes seem to sway ever so slightly, as if they too are growing tired. The story, Medusa's story, feels wrapped around you like a warm blanket, soft but weighty, a reminder that myths don't really end. They just coil back into themselves, waiting for someone else to stumble in and listen. You let your gaze drift, half-lidded, across the carvings on the cave walls. There's a spiral here, an eye there, the faint impression of something that might once have been a face, a curl of a smile maybe, or a single staring eye. And you think, why does Medusa's story still linger? After all these centuries, after all the poets and painters and whispered retellings, why does her face, her hair, still catch our imaginations like a glint of torchlight in the dark? Maybe it's because she's more than just a monster. She's a question, an idea, a knot we can't quite untangle. Was she a victim of the gods, a woman punished for something she couldn't control? Or was she a figure of power, untouchable and fierce, who chose to live apart from the world because the world couldn't handle her? Historians still argue whether Medusa's story was a warning for women, stay in your place, don't draw too much attention, or whether she was a symbol of rage, beauty, and defiance in a world that punished those things. And then there's the question of how we use her. Medusa's face became a symbol. Yes, but what kind of symbol? A warning against vanity? A charm to ward off evil? A reminder of the fine line between beauty and danger? Or is it something else entirely? Maybe a quiet, whispered promise that even when you're feared, even when you're cast out, there's still a kind of power in being seen, in being remembered, even if it's not quite the way you wanted. You shift slightly, the cave floor cool beneath you, and the thought drifts in. Maybe Medusa wasn't meant to be understood. Maybe she's like the snakes themselves, slippery, shifting, impossible to pin down without getting bitten. Her story twists and turns, changes shape depending on who's telling it, and maybe that's the whole point. She's a symbol of contradictions, beauty and terror, victim and monster, power and punishment, a woman cursed by a goddess, feared by mortals, and yet somehow unforgettable. You picture her now, half in the shadows, half in the light, her hair a restless, slithering crown that whispers secrets you're too tired to fully understand. She doesn't smile exactly, but she doesn't scowl either. Her eyes, wide and deep, seem to say, "There's more to me than you'll ever know." And isn't that what all good myths do? They leave you wondering, leave you drifting, leave you just a little lost in the dark. The torch's glow dims one last time, and you close your eyes. The cave seems to settle, the air thick with the hush of ancient stories curling into themselves, waiting for another night, another listener. The snakes seem to sigh, the stones cool beneath your skin, and your breath slows, softer, deeper, blending into the quiet. And in the dark, as your thoughts drift like dust in a beam of fading light, you know that Medusa's story isn't just about monsters or heroes, gods or mortals. It's about the things we fear, the things we admire, the things we can't quite explain, and how they curl together, tangled like a nest of snakes, waiting in the shadows of our dreams. The torch's light fades completely now, leaving only the soft, quiet pulse of the cave around you. The air settles, cool and still, and the hush of ancient stone seems to breathe with you, slow and even, a gentle rhythm that rocks you into the edges of sleep. The walls, once alive with carvings and shadows, now blur into a soft, dark haze, just faint outlines of shapes, swirling lines, and the ghost of stories told long ago. You feel the weight of it all sinking into the floor. Beneath you, the memories of Medusa curling into the quiet, her story wrapping around itself like a long-forgotten song. The snakes, the stones, the whisper of a goddess's curse. All of it fades now, soft as a sigh, leaving only the steady, even rhythm of your breath. Your body feels heavy in the best possible way, your limbs loose and warm, as if the cave itself is cradling you in the dark. The air hums, soft and steady, and you let it guide you deeper into that gentle place between waking and dreaming. The last flicker of the torch glows behind your eyelids, then fades completely, leaving only the softest echo of light. And in that quiet, you hear the faintest hiss, maybe a snake, maybe just the breath of the earth itself, slipping into the edges of your thoughts as you drift, slowly, softly, into sleep. Good night.